David Tod Johnstone. I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, December 26, 1943. I went into the military in 1966. I was in college up in Portland, Maine. They didn't recognize the college, and therefore I was drafted. I said I didn't want to do 2 years. I said if I went enlisted and did 3, I could get elective choices as to what my MOS, my military occupational skill was. So I added an extra year and got into it. Therefore, I had a choice without the Army telling me exactly what I had to do. What I left behind was just living where I was at the time. I mean, it was pretty hectic at that time with all the anti-this, anti-war, and the Jane Fonda stuff and everything, but I wasn't really involved in all of that. But so it was leaving family, and basically that it. But after surviving my earlier adventures in life with the boat on the Albatross and the sinking and everything, going into the military, learning to take orders and do the rest was not that detrimental to adapting. So I was able to adapt to that. It was what the Army was going to do with you at that time. And there was ultimately really no reality of any difference other than going to Vietnam.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the specialized training you received and the hardest part of the training?
Well, I was able to qualify for cartographic draftsman, which is basically a map maker. And I did very well in that, having an art background and a drafting background. When I got into the Army, we accelerated, and then they said, okay, we're starting a program over in Vietnam called Decca Navigation, which was a very highly accurate navigation system that they were going to employ in the helicopters. And I did so well in my first part that I was selected to be one of the members of the first 8 trained in the United States Army in Decca Navigation. So I completed that, and then I went to Vietnam. And what basically Decca was a similar to what like a GPS thing today. It was a modified Loran system, and we had a piano. It was like an old piano scroll in the helicopter that the helicopter pilot could then plug in the coordinates, and it would trace on the map where he was going. And the whole idea behind it was that they could call in the coordinates, the helicopter could fly in, pick up the people without sending a flare up in the air and telling everybody in the world where you were. Because at that happening, the enemy knew where you were exactly. They would shoot the helicopter down and kill the rescue people. This way, the survival rate of both equipment and personnel went straight up.
Do you recall the day service ended and where you were?
Well, I was restationed back at Fort Belvoir in Virginia. It was interesting. We were back, we got back, we're the first trained group back, military group back into Washington, D.C., and it happened to be the day Dr. Martin Luther King, we were sent into town to quell the rioting. They gave us guns with no ammunition or no triggers or anything. We were supposed to stop somebody from stealing a big television. We said, hey, take it, not my problem. But went back, had only a few months left, and then I was discharged from there, where I stayed in Washington, D.C. at the time. I went to work for a company for doing briefings for the Pentagon, and then later went to another company that we did the simulations and animations of Apollo moon landing. Wow. So I stayed within the graphic arts type business that I still am in.
How were you received by your family and community upon your return?
At first, it wasn't really anything because they didn't know. I hadn't notified them that I was coming back to the house or anything. And at that time, it was we were told not to travel in our uniforms because of, and We were spit on and called baby killers. The respect for the people that were wearing a uniform was zero at that tolerance time in 60, 68, and so on. So I came back somewhat, yes, they were relieved that I was home, but not that type of thing. And I would just say it on the polite way, I was cold parented. I was shipped off to boarding school in the 5th grade, so I never knew exactly that home real thing. So it was like coming home as being a friend, not so much as parent.
Was there much of a readjustment for you when you returned back to civilian life?
The readjustment was not having the memories of having to look over your shoulder, so to speak, of whether I'm going to get shot or the living conditions that we had over there. We had a hooch and when we were in Saigon, but when we went out to the field up in Bong Song and stuff, we were intense, and we dug holes in the ground, our body width size and everything else. And we went and we put boards over and put canvas over the top, and we lived down in a hole in the ground in case shrapnel came in and was shot. So living conditions, your hot shower was a 55-gallon drum up with some water in it that dripped on you. Your toiletries were an outhouse somewhere. So yes, you came back, you had the creature comforts of regular living, and also you got to appreciate the things that we have here. The convenience of a store or something else, or just the overall general condition of living.
What are some life lessons you learned from your military service?
What I learned basically was I was proud that I wore a uniform. I was not one of the group that took off and went to Canada or anything else. I mean, we have a wonderful country. It's asked nothing more than to stand up and respect it. I sort of feel that it would be a good idea today to every boy of age at least give a year of training or service to learn it. You learn to respect, yes sir, no sir, and it was something I had already had back experiences with, but it just amplified the fact that this is the way to be.
What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
What they sacrifice and what they do, the harm that they are put in front of. I think of some of these poor guys that have gone to the Middle East and living conditions and everything else getting shot at. I mean, people sit home and they don't worry about this. If they were in the field and experiencing this, they would have a whole nother realization of appreciation for life and come out and support the vets. I see a veteran today walking around on the street, I walk up and say, thank you for your service. And I honor them for that. It takes when we came back from Vietnam, we were not given anything for our service. The state of Connecticut looked at us and said, oh, here's $100, see you later. Hello? I just went over, people went over. We lost 50,000 in our generation in Vietnam, and yet there was no thank you sort of given back as benefits or anything.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
It's a tough one to say because the course of the way we're going today, it's unpredictable. I don't have a crystal ball to say what they are, but the modifications in warfare, and you look at the poor things that are going on now in Ukraine and all the rest of this, and sometimes it really stopped to think that we have to come together as human beings and stop fighting and live for mankind, because the destruction of war doesn't fix a problem.
Anything else you want to add that we have not covered?
No, I feel very good with all of that. Thank you. And,
thank you.
You know, I'm proud to have done what I did and will continue to do that.